It doesn't start with avoiding people. It starts with a feeling, quiet and certain, that home is where you finally stop performing, where the world can't reach you, where you don't have to be anything other than still. This is the psychology of the homebody, and it's deeper than just preferring your couch. Maybe you were the child who felt different at school, the one who counted down the hours until you could return to your room, close the door, and finally breathe. Social situations felt like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. You could do it, but it was exhausting. By the time you were a teenager, you'd perfected the art of strategic cancelling. You'd say yes to plans, genuinely meaning it, but as the day approached, a familiar dread would creep in. The thought of getting ready, leaving the house, being on for hours, it felt like too much. So you'd craft an excuse, apologize profusely, and feel both guilty and relieved. Now, as an adult, home isn't just where you live. It's your sanctuary, your fortress, the only place where you don't have to manage other people's expectations or monitor your own energy levels. You've curated every corner to feel safe, the right lighting, the familiar smells, the predictable rhythms. And when people ask why you never want to go out, you struggle to explain. Because it's not that you hate people or fear the world, it's that leaving home requires a kind of emotional preparation that drains you before you even arrive. The outside world demands a version of yourself that feels like a performance, and home is where you finally get to stop acting. You're not antisocial. You're just deeply, fundamentally protective of your peace. Psychologists don't call this agoraphobia unless it's pathological. For most people who love staying home, it's something else. Environmental sensitivity combined with high need for control and predictability. Here's what really happens. There are typically 3 psychological profiles of people who genuinely prefer staying home, and they stem from different needs. The first type, the overstimulated homebody. You love staying home because the outside world is sensory overload. Crowds, noise, bright lights, unpredictable social dynamics, they exhaust your nervous system. You're likely what researchers call a highly sensitive person, HSP, someone whose brain processes stimuli more deeply than others. This isn't weakness, it's neurology. Studies show that about 15 to 20% of the population has a more reactive nervous system. You notice subtleties others miss, the hum of fluorescent lights, the tension in someone's voice, the energy shift when you enter a room. And all that noticing is exhausting. Home becomes the place where you can finally turn down the volume, where you control the inputs, where you can exist without constantly filtering the world. The second type, the socially depleted homebody. You love staying home because socializing costs you more than it costs others. You're likely an introvert with low social battery capacity. It's not that you don't enjoy people, it's that people require energy you need to consciously ration. Neuroscience shows that introverts' brains have longer neural pathways for processing stimuli, which means social interaction requires more cognitive effort. Extroverts get energized by external stimulation. You get depleted, and home is where you recharge. The third type, the wounded homebody. You love staying home because somewhere along the way, the outside world stopped feeling safe. Maybe you were bullied, rejected, or traumatized. Maybe you developed social anxiety or trust issues. Home became more than comfort, it became protection. This creates what psychologists call safety-seeking behavior. Your brain learned that home equals safety and outside equals threat, so you minimize exposure to reduce risk. It's not laziness, it's a nervous system trying to protect you from pain it remembers. But here's what all 3 types share. Home is where you feel most authentically yourself. It's not about hiding from life, it's about creating a life that doesn't require you to constantly adapt, perform, or defend your right to exist quietly. But here's what no one tells you about loving home too much. There's a difference between sanctuary and prison. Because when staying home shifts from preference to compulsion, when the thought of leaving triggers genuine anxiety, when you start declining opportunities not because you don't want them, but because you're afraid, that's when comfort becomes cage. And here's the part that's hard to admit. Sometimes you're lonely. Not the loneliness of being alone, you've made peace with that. But the loneliness of wanting connection and being too exhausted by the idea of pursuing it. You watch people live their lives on social media, traveling, socializing, seemingly effortless. And you feel both envious and judgmental. Why do they need so much? Why can't they just be still? But underneath that, there's a quieter question. Am I missing out? Am I choosing peace or avoiding life? And relationships become complicated because the people who love you don't always understand. They take your refusals personally. You never want to do anything. You're always canceling. Don't you get bored? And you try to explain that home isn't boring to you, that solitude isn't loneliness, that you're genuinely happy in your own space, but they don't believe you, or worse, they pity you. They see your contentment as settling, your boundaries as limitations. So you start feeling guilty for something that feels natural to you. You force yourself to go out, to say yes, to prove you're not broken, but it backfires. You're resentful, exhausted, counting down the minutes until you can leave, and that makes you feel even more defective. Here's the cruelest part. You don't even know if your preference is authentic anymore or if it's just trauma disguised as personality. Am I naturally introverted, or did I learn to stay home because people hurt me? Do I genuinely love solitude, or am I just too scared to try connection? And those questions haunt you, because if you can't trust your own preferences, what can you trust? Here's the truth they don't tell homebodies. Loving your home isn't the problem. The problem is when home becomes the only place you feel safe. There's a difference between choosing to stay home and needing to stay home. One is preference, the other is avoidance, and only you can honestly know which one you're doing. So what does healthy home loving look like? It starts with honest self-assessment. Is this serving me or protecting me from something I need to face? If staying home feels peaceful, restorative, aligned with your values, that's healthy. You're an introvert, an HSP, someone who genuinely thrives in solitude. Honor that. Build a life that respects your wiring. But if staying home feels compulsive, if you want to go out but can't, if you're declining opportunities that genuinely interest you because of anxiety, that's different. That's not preference, that's fear. And fear, unchallenged, only grows. Here's a practice. Expand your comfort zone gently, not violently. You don't have to become an extrovert. You don't have to love crowds or parties or constant social stimulation. But you also don't have to let your world shrink to the size of your living room. Try small exposures, a quiet coffee shop, a walk in the park, a one-on-one conversation with someone safe. Build evidence that the outside world isn't always overwhelming, that you can handle more than you think. And this is crucial. Stop apologizing for your needs. If you're genuinely happy at home, own it. Stop justifying your choices to people who will never understand. Stop forcing yourself to live according to someone else's definition of a full life. But also, stop using home as an excuse to avoid growth. There's a version of staying home that's self-care, and there's a version that's self-imprisonment. Be honest about which one you're doing. You might also need to grieve, to mourn the social ease you see in others and will never have. The spontaneity, the fearlessness, the ability to just be in the world without it costing so much. That grief is real, and it's okay to feel it. But it doesn't mean you're broken, it just means you're different. And different is allowed. You've spent so many years feeling like something is wrong with you because you don't crave what others crave, because you're happiest in your own space, because leaving home feels like work, not freedom. But here's the quiet truth. There's nothing wrong with loving home, with needing solitude, with building a life that honors your sensitivity instead of fighting it. The world will always tell you to go out more, do more, be more, but you don't owe anyone a life that exhausts you. What you do owe yourself is honesty about whether your love of home is peace or prison, whether your solitude is chosen or compulsive, whether you're protecting yourself or hiding. So the next time you decline an invitation, pause and ask yourself, am I saying no because I genuinely don't want to go? Or because I'm afraid of what happens if I do? You don't have to change who you are, but you also don't have to let fear decide what your life becomes. You are allowed to love staying home. You are allowed to need solitude. You are allowed to build a small, quiet, deeply personal life. And you are also allowed to challenge yourself to venture out, to discover that you're braver than you think. Home will always be there when you return. but the world is waiting too. Start there. That's where you get to decide what kind of homebody you want to be.